Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the third in our series with Klaus Paulsen, the founder of Adventure Labs in Denmark. Klaus, hi. It's good to see you again. Thank you for joining us.
Well, my pleasure. It's great to be here again. I'm looking forward to yet another conversation on storytelling and experience design.
Oh, great. Well, listen, hey, we've covered a lot of ground over the last two videos, but I think we've probably saved one of the most interesting bits for the last one, which is really about immersive journeys and having the audience at the center of the story experience that you're designing. And I know there's a lot of stuff that you've been working on about this, and I know this is a very buzzy area, but as you say, you like to go beyond the buzz and tell us a little bit more about what this means to us as people working in agencies and how we can use storytelling in this way to the benefit of our clients. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about this immersive journey that you're looking at taking with people?
So if there's one buzzword that really is out there right now and accelerated by all the talk of metaverse and XR and what have you, it's immersive. It's how to immerse someone in something. And that has been translated into having something surround you, or you're walking into something. And it is much more powerful when you stop thinking about people as props and start thinking about them as the center of your universe. So we're used to thinking about audiences as this. We move them from A to B. They walk or we put them in a ride, or they go from A to B in the branch zone or at the sports event. They sit on in their chair, they lie in their bed and all that. But they're on the outside looking in. So the whole idea about immersion as part of an audience-centric design is really about what happens if we truly invite them into our story. And as for those of you who have seen our talk on story experience design, what we're talking about there is also that we don't create experiences to create experiences. We create experiences to create memories, and preferably shareable memories. And so this is the same thing. Now you are not looking at the hero or at the star, but you get to become the hero of the star in this.
And I think one of the interesting things I know when we talked previously is because everybody experiences things in a slightly different way. This sort of this immersion within a story will be experienced differently by different people, and it's not just a sort of a very surface level. Because if you're talking about people perhaps with disabilities, then there's another layer on top of this, presumably, about how they experience the story. Would that be true?
Absolutely. So in integrated storytelling terms, we think about this as filters. Whatever filters is around the audience, audience core, and that is your perception of something. One of the examples that is used on immersion again and again, like full immersion, throw somebody in the water, that's immersion. And but let's go further than that. Again, we can throw somebody in the water. We could have thrown a stone in the water. It's the same, it's the same story. But here we're saying, what is the immersion that happens inside? So on your point of things happening through the eye of the beholder, if you can swim and if you can't swim, that's going to be two very different immersive experiences. And the outcome of them is also going to be very, very different as well. So this is about, when we talk creative strategy as part of integrated storytelling, as part of story experience design, it's not about talking segments. It's not about talking age group. It's about talking people and the filters that they bring with them. Sometimes those filters are cultural, and sometimes they're different. But it's certainly understanding, who are they as people? And once you start working with audience-centric design, that's part of how you actually design your story experiences, which is the combination of story and experience, or the experience, how you experience the story.
I guess one of the things that always interested me about this was the fact that as strategists, as creatives, as marketeers, we're very used to taking a customer or an individual on a particular journey. So they have a particular experience and leave that journey with a particular story, which we want them to have. And this takes control away a little bit from how that ends up, doesn't it? I mean, it's really analogous to sort of when social media first started. We all panicked like there was no tomorrow, that people would actually start to interact with brands in their own way and make their own stories up about that brand. Isn't there a danger with this, that goes the same sort of way?
Well, there is the challenge and the opportunity. I think it's a wonderful area, because some of the things that we are working with in integrated storytelling, and some of the things I defined in my book. Sorry to plug that, integrated storytelling by design. It's that color on the front and everything. So it's one of the points there is that we need to accept the new roles of the audience. And the new roles of the audience is that they're not just sitting in that couch. They're not just, clinging to that corner, watching at a screen. They have now achieved influence through different kind of media. Just look, if people don't like a movie, they're going to get a copy of that movie, re-edit it, and put it out online. So we have these different steps from the passive audience. And this is not, it's not like more interactive is better than anything else. But they're different. There's just different levels of influence that we can work with strategically, and certainly understanding that there are different levels of influence. So passive, let's be honest, if you haven't had any interaction training, if you've media training, communication training, most of your training has been about the passive audience. How do I get this point across to them? Now, once you start evolving on that and say, well, there are other kinds of things. There is the explorer, the explorative audience. They get to go in and witness the story world, often surrounded by it, but still they don't really get to influence the story. Obviously, now they're going to build their own story, because now they're going to have their own narrative of their own memory. You take that even further, and then you start talking about, well, I can actually interact with something. I can shoot an alien, and something will happen or will not happen. I can do these different things. I don't necessarily have to. I don't necessarily have to change the storyline, but I still feel like I have a level of influence in that. Now that goes even further, and it's interesting because you can just granulate these levels, so you end up not having like a handful of them, but 120 of them. But one level that was defined before that became something was actually the level of influence. So there's a prediction there about the level of influence and how the influencer can actually change a storyline by adding new layers of stories to it. So now you get to influence the storyline, and we see this in effect right now. We see it being used, and we see it misused and understood and misunderstood. Then when you move even further from that, you're going into a co-creation realm, and you're going into how much do you actually want to include your audience. And one of the things that's very interesting now is that these principles actually apply very, very much to the agency that we can give audiences in real time with AR tools that are right now. You don't have to script everything. Eventually, your virtual character will learn to respond. And then you have even further level where creators like the wonderful people you and I represent and work with take a step back. They provide the framework, and the audience becomes the creators. So basically, we become Photoshop and leave it to someone, right? But there are different levels of how you can direct this, how you can work with this. And one of the things is to accept that storytelling might not be the exact words and the exact number of words that I delivered. It might be all the elements that I delivered that is now spawning 1,000 different stories that support the brand sentiment that I want to achieve anyway. And one of the very interesting things when I talk about these things with students and professionals and studio executives, and do presentations on this, I always have this question about, it all comes down to how much freedom do you want to give the audience. And the thing is, even within one story experience, it might differ. You might have someone going from the passive to the co-creative to something else and going out the other way again. And one of the things is you can use it as a strategy. And you say, we want this to be not people's recollection of a brand, but their own retelling of a brand experience. And that is extremely powerful, but it's new ways of seeing the world because it becomes so multi-eyed through millions of eyes and millions of perspectives.
So in some ways, we've almost gone full circle in terms of storytelling, because we started by having the verbalization of stories, I guess, which were then recorded into cave paintings and then retold and retold. And as I think you said in one of your earlier videos, perhaps embellished slightly to make the hero figure seem stronger or whatever, to something which is a bit more enclosed and directed, which is what we've had probably in the world of advertising, where we have a very specific message that we want to get across for people to absorb. And now we're almost at a stage where we're giving people, much like you would do if you bought a packet mix of cakes or something, you're giving them all of the ingredients and saying, there you go and create something. And, given my baking abilities, my cake would be somewhat different, say, perhaps to your cake. So do you see that? Is that the future, perhaps? I mean, you mentioned AI, which is an interesting thing, which perhaps we could pick up on as well, because it's obviously very buzzy. I mean, will you and I become avatars in a few years' time and basically work ourselves out of a job? But do you see? I mean, is this the sort of thing we're looking at now?
I think it is. I think it is. Like the one, speaking of buzzwords, one of the things that comes up regardless of whether you talk to attraction people, museum people, marketing, art, and all that is about personalization. And sometimes it's viewed upon as very AI and very digital. Well, let's remember what AI is. AI is a machine learning things from input. So when we see the lawsuits coming up now from the authors and so on, it's because AIs have been fed their work and is now regurgitating that rather than coming up with something original. If we look at the tradition of what created relationships with that and that job, I did a funny article a couple of years ago for Adobe, actually, where I called it the relation shop. And it doesn't have to apply to only retail. But the point is that we are actually, one of the things that AI is doing now is we are doing human mirroring. So that person, at that office or at that store and, at that shop, that place, that whatever it is, that person that recognizes you and say, hey, Paul, tell you what, I know you really, really like this. So perhaps you want to have this, and even adjusts his or her way of speaking to you being you. So it's the same thing, it's basically the same thing. It's not something that was invented with AI. I think what is the powerful thing, I love that you go back to the living narrative and go back to, the oral story, which would be changed based on where we're around the campfire. We're now the first time in history where that can be distributed real time worldwide. So the principles are not new, but the width and the spread and the speed which we can with which we can use it, that's the first time for humanity right now.
So, I mean, ultimately, an optimistic perspective on where we go, rather than something we're all, pessimistic Terminator, we're all going to die because of AI. But I see where you're saying. It's very interesting. And I guess finally, what I would ask is, we work with a wide array of brands, and would you say that this type of approach is sort of applicable for most of them, or are there very specific brands? I'm thinking of my colleagues watching this.
I think it is applicable to many, many different things. I've been surprised myself. I come from originally like a show and arts world, went into advertising and marketing, worked with a lot of different things where I recognized that the key to doing great work is not necessarily just to go in one direction, but it's that professional curiosity that will drive you and figure out what is interesting about this, what is exciting about this. And then, going into store experience, which of course has a heavy tradition within the museums, theme parks, attractions, and so on, leisure and so on. But I quickly became involved in all sorts of products. And I think the point of that is everything is a brand in my mind. I've been enough with great brain people to be indoctrinated enough to think like that. Everything is a brand. So it's a strong or it's a weak brand, and once you realize that, and once you realize that the dynamics of a brand is the same dynamics as human friendship and human relations, what we experience together, what stories we share is actually what reinforces that or establishes that relationship. I think then it's not down to industry, then it's more down to the particular brand and what it carries, and what kind of values can be worked with, and whomever you're trying to include in it, and whether they have the audacity and the bravery to look at their audiences and thus their customers in a different way.
Klaus, as ever, I love talking to you. It opens the mind up and it sort of flips the common way of looking at things on its head. But we're out of time, and thank you so much for your time. It's been great, to say, talking to you today. For my colleagues watching this, if they want to reach out to you, is there a specific way they can get hold of you? I know you've got a book which they should read. We'll put a little clip of it up there. But how best should they reach out to you?
Well, I'd love to invite everybody to just send me an email, klaus@adventurelabstudio.com. If you want to chat, if you're curious about these things, and the different ways of working together, like, talks, training, facilitation, workshops, blending teams with other kind of talents and disciplines, even for a while, and move everything forward. What people find when they work with Adventure Lab is, you're going to move forward yourself as well. It's not just a question of completing a project. It's also a question about having new things in the toolbox. So it might be relevant, it might not be relevant, but I love to talk to you anyway. So I don't necessarily think too much about it. Just if you think some of this might be interesting, drop me a line.
Sounds great. Klaus, thank you so much for your time over the last 3 videos that we've done. Good to see you as ever. Take care.
Thank you. You too.